My nation will work with the UN Security Council to meet our common challenge. If Iraq's regime defies us again, the world must move deliberately, decisively to hold Iraq to account. We will work with the UN Security Council for the necessary resolutions, but the purposes of the United States should not be doubted. The Security Council resolutions will be enforced. The just demands of peace and security will be met, or action will be unavoidable.
It's 28 past the hour. That was former President Bush in 2002 in a speech that was reportedly not meant to be given at all to the UN. That's according to contributing editor of Vanity Fair, Kurt Eichenwald, who writes about that moment and other details of the first 500 days after the September 11th attacks in his new book, 500 Days, Secrets and Lies in the Terror Wars. And you actually have a piece in the New York Times that reads in part this. Kurt, welcome to the show. The direct warnings to Mr. Bush about the possibility of an al-Qaeda attack began in the spring of 2001. By May 1st, the CIA told the White House of a report that a group presently in the United States was planning a terrorist operation. Weeks later, on June 22nd, the Daily Brief reported that Qaeda strikes could be imminent, although intelligence suggested the time frame was flexible. But some in the administration considered the warning to be just bluster. An intelligence official and a member of the Bush administration both told me in interviews that the neoconservative leaders who had recently assumed power at the Pentagon were warning the White House that the CIA had been fooled. According to this theory, bin Laden was merely pretending to be planning an attack to distract the administration from Saddam Hussein, whom the neoconservatives saw as a greater threat. And you mentioned in the article that you saw some briefs preceding the notorious one that gets all the press, that you read excerpts of, and that they lead you to an inescapable conclusion. The administration's reaction to what Mr. Bush was told in the weeks before the briefing reflected significantly more negligence than has been disclosed. What did you see in those briefings that would state that?
Well, it was the constant reiteration of, you know, there are people in the United States, they're going to attack, there are going to be large casualties. I mean, those were the words that were used. And that is coming before late June. And by late June, the CIA is coming back basically stomping their feet, saying, we're not making this up, we're not being fooled.
But if I may, was there something specific in the briefings, something that would then lead them to be able to act in order to prevent, or are you just saying that there were warnings?
Absolutely, there was stuff that could be done. It's one of the conceits of this that people have come back and said,
what?
Oh, unless you say when, where, and how, you can't do anything. In 1999, in December of 1999, the Clinton administration got, or the CIA, the same people in the CIA, got the warnings that something big was coming. And the entire government went on alert. And the Counterterrorist Center burned through their budget for 2000 by January 15th because they were throwing so much into it.
But you're characterizing attitudes, saying negligence or dismissive, which, you know what, that's you can believe one thing, another person can believe another. What specifically did you see in the briefings that would lead you to believe the Bush administration dismissed the opportunity to keep America safe? I want specifics.
Well, you're overstating the case. I mean, what you're saying is, where in here does it say it? It's not in here. Well, what you've got is, here's the warning. We're not doing anything. And in fact, you got to go back and look at what's going on. John Ashcroft was asked, pump up our budget for counterterrorism. No. You had, what are the priorities for the Justice Department? You had 13 of them. Terrorism was not one of them. And he was briefed on July 5th as to what was coming. And so you have to not just say, does it say the World Trade Center will be attacked on 9/11? Of course it doesn't say that. There's never intelligence like that. But what it does have is what the people in the intelligence communities tell me is the sharpest warnings that have ever been delivered. Now, there's one thing I want to make very clear, though, and this is something that I think people don't get. The Bush administration came in after the Republicans were out for 8 years. Al-Qaeda developed over that time. When the Republicans went out, nation states were the threat. When they came back in, it's a very odd jump to say a bunch of people sitting in a mountaintop in Afghanistan are the threat. And they were looking at nation states, and that was not an unreasonable thing to do. They had a quick period of time. They had to change their mind. They didn't buy into it.
Kurt, we should be very clear about what you're saying in the New York Times piece this morning, because a lot of people will read this and say the Bush administration willingly looked the other way. When they had these reports. If you go back to the May 1st briefing, you list about 5 or 6 before the notorious one. What are you saying about what the Bush administration did exactly?
Pretty much what I'm just saying now is that they got this information and they weren't looking at it in the context of, here is this huge threat that's developed. I mean, look at what the Pentagon said. What's the nation state that's backing them? Oh, we think it's Iraq. And so it was a frame of mind that was not unreasonable for them to have, because they hadn't been getting the intelligence until very recently about the evolution and change of Al-Qaeda, or of the nature of the threat. You can't understate what a huge transition that was.
Pataki.
I just think this is incredibly unfortunate, to be perfectly honest, because first of all, having been there on September 11th and for weeks, months thereafter, President Bush provided inspired, effective leadership. And September 11th, everything changed. And to look 11 years later and say, aha, this was happening before September 11th in the summer, and to go through and selectively take out quotes and say, you should have done that, you should have done that, I think it's incredibly unfair and a disservice to history. And by the way, you know, if you look back, there are those who could have said President Roosevelt was at fault for Pearl Harbor.
And
look
there
at
were a
all
lot
the
of people who do
intelligence.
say that.
But the government didn't look back and say, let's blame the president. It came together to fight an important war. We came together to fight an important war. Wait, you could also look back, Kurt, and say that you got intelligence we were going to be attacked. Of course, we'd already been attacked. The towers were blown up in '93. And I don't think it serves us any point to say that then the Clinton administration treated it as a criminal act as opposed to a terrorist act. They blew up the coal, destroyed our embassy in East Africa with hundreds of losses of lives. And we never, the prior administration never said, we are in a war with Al-Qaeda. We are engaged in a post-nation state anti-terrorist climate. They didn't say that. So now
well,
to
actually,
say...
they did.
No,
in
they
1998.
didn't. No, they didn't. So
George
now to
Tenet
stay
put out
after
a
the
thing
effect...
saying, we are declaring war on Al-Qaeda.
Well,
it was an intelligence war working with the Northern Alliance. We weren't committing troops, but there absolutely was a 1998 dissemination.
Well, then it was hideously ineffective because the planning, the training, all came out of Afghanistan. And if they were aware back then, maybe you could say it would have never happened if in '99 and 2000 they would have been more aggressive and had a more effective policy to create that. But it doesn't serve a point other than to try to say, this party or this president is awful. He wasn't. He was an excellent leader at a hideous time.
That's not what I'm saying.
And rallied the American people, and that's what we need now.
Try and paraphrase what you're saying then.
What I am saying is, we cannot say, I'm not going to pay attention to history, because that part of history is my part.
But we cannot...
Wait. I let you talk. You're part of the story. You're saying, Clinton did this, Clinton did that, Clinton did the other. You know what? You're right. Now, let's go to talking about the summer of 2001 and saying, we can't talk about it. We can't learn from it because it's upsetting.
Of course.
It's completely wrong. It's 11 years later. Of course we can talk about it
and learn from it, but it should be done in a fair way, not in a way where I haven't read your book, thank God, and I don't intend to, but just looking at the jacket of the quotes in the back. These are selectively taken for a specific purpose of making the Bush administration look bad. This is not about history. I don't mind history.
Here's the first page, or the second page. Actually, I'm not going to find it here. But what you've got is, hold on. Bush's down-home veneer, Bonk thought, he's the second in command, disguised a keen mind. Bonk had expected to be dealing with an intellectual lightweight, reliant on his aides for guidance in the subtleties of statecraft. Instead, it was Bush who peppered the briefers with frequent and often insightful questions while his subordinates stayed quiet. Page 2. So the problem is, if you look at the jacket of a book, don't judge a book by its cover. If you look at the jacket of the book, it says, here's what it says. You can't do that. And when you read this book, hold on. When you read this book, what you end up with is, in fact, a very nuanced telling of the story. One of the things, you want to know who's reacted to this book the best? Members of the Bush administration. I've gotten calls from people saying, that's what happened. And so, the realities here are, we cannot stand back and say, Bush did everything right. He did.
Absolutely.
He made some very horrific mistakes.
I know of no one who has done everything
We can't say Clinton did everything right. He didn't.
This is an incredible debate. John Meacham, I'll let you put the period at the end of the sentence as our
very quickly,
morning show theologian.
Which might offer some resolution to where folks stand here. Would you contend that if Al Gore had become president, because he was in a continuation with Bill Clinton's administration, the results would have been different?
It's like if things were different.
That's an interesting question.
Well, it's like if things were different, would they be the same? I have no idea.
Oh no, that's a
well. Then wait. Then you can't say what they should have been doing something.
Yeah.
But
what does that mean?
But I'm not saying they should be doing something. What I'm saying is, here's the information they got.
Right.
Here's what they didn't do compared to what was done in the past. Now, I don't say anything. What I'm telling you is, here's what one of the things in the article this morning, and is also in the book, is that members of the Counterterrorist Center had a meeting on July 5th and said, let's put in for a mass transfer because they're not listening to us. And this is going to go down, and it's going to be ugly, and we're going to be held accountable for it. I want out.
All right.
And
the book is 500 Days, Secrets and Lies in the Terror Wars. Kurt Eichenwald, thank you very much for being on the show. Governor Pataki, thank you for standing your ground in this segment.
A good piece in the Times today. Everybody ought to read.
Piece in the Times. Coming up, the 9/11 surfer. We'll talk to the man whose extraordinary survival story during the 9/11 attacks has inspired a new documentary. We'll be right back.